Shabbat Shalom. As you may know, I mentioned at the beginning, we're in this period of the Jewish year called Sfirat HaOmer. It's the counting of the Omer. The Omer is a sacrifice that's offered on Shavuot. And so you're counting up from Passover to Shavuot, 7 weeks, 49 days. And when you get to the 50th day, it's the next holiday, which is going to be at the end of May. This year, we're co-hosting our Shavuot celebration with Valley Beth Shalom and 6 other synagogues. And so you'll learn more about that. Hopefully you'll come and join us. And then we'll have a festival service right here, including Yizkor, on the day of Shavuot. But that's the period that we find ourselves in. And it's a holiday that's very, very ancient. It goes all the way back to biblical times. But in the middle of these days of counting between Passover and Shavuot, there are contemporary holidays, 3 contemporary holidays that have been added just in the 20th century. At the end of April this year, on the 13th day of the counting of the Omer, we commemorated Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. And then a week later, on the 20th day of this counting period of these 49 days, we observed Yom HaZikaron, Israel's day where we remember all of the dead who fell in Israel's wars and all the victims of terror. And then the very next day, on the 21st day of the counting of the Omer, we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, this year marking 69 years of independence for the state of Israel. And if you follow me on Facebook, and if you don't, what are you waiting for? I mean, it's so entertaining. I'm up to like 17, or is it 18 followers? 17, 18. So we're right in there. It's hard to keep track. But if you do, you can find pictures of our trip to Israel, because just last week I returned from a 10-day journey, and your son was with me, and he was so well behaved. He did such a great job. Benjamin was amazing. But we brought 12 sixth graders to Israel for 10 days, and we visited our twin school there, our school, Stephen Wise Temple, Wise School, with the El Kharizi School in North Tel Aviv. And tonight I want to share a few stories from my trip to Israel that each story teaches us a lesson that relates to one of these days that I just mentioned, but they also teach us lessons that I think relate to our lives, to the moment that we find ourselves in right now on this Shabbat. So the first story is a story about a man that I've mentioned before from this bima, but you might not all have been here that night. He's my cousin, actually. His name is Menashe Davidovich. Menashe was born in 1928 in a town that I cannot pronounce. And if you know Hungarian, then after services, I know you can do a Hungarian accent, but if you can speak Hungarian, come up afterwards and you'll try to pronounce this name for me. It's spelled Satoraljahuhely. I defy you to pronounce that name. My cousin pronounced it for me like 5 times. I had to tape record it, and I can't say it. But it's near the border of Slovakia. He grew up in a religious family. He studied Torah every day. And there's so many things I'd like to share with you about the life of my cousin Menashe. And I got to spend time with him when I was in Israel last week. And if you go to my Facebook page, you can see pictures of me and Menashe and his wife Miriam. But I just want to share one story and the lesson that came out of that story. Menashe was living in Hungary, and as you might know, Hungarian Jewry was the last community in Europe that was destroyed by the Nazis, or that they attempted to destroy. And Menashe and his mother, his 3 sisters, and his baby brother were all sent from their town, whose name I cannot pronounce, to Auschwitz on June 6th, 1944. And you know what happened on June 6th, 1944? Who remembers? I mean, nobody here remembers, but you might have learned about it in school. It was D-Day. Cantor Lamb, you get the gold star. D-Day was on June 6th, 1944. So the very day my cousin and his entire family arrived at Auschwitz, the Allied forces were invading. And when they got off the train, as you know from studying about this period, there was immediately a selection. And Menashe, who was 15 at the time and strong, was sent to the right, and his mother, his 3 sisters, and his brother were sent to the left, and he found out later that they were all killed that day. He was then, a week later, he was sent to work for BMW, at a forced labor camp as slave labor called Dachau. And while he was there, they built train tracks for larger, wider trains that the Nazis were using to transport airplane engines that they were manufacturing at the BMW plant to their air bases all around Germany. And after the war, he survived, obviously, because I was with him last week. After the war, he returned to his hometown, and he was hoping that he could find his father. He knew that the rest of his family had died. And his father returned, and they reunited. And Menashe said, "Come, Daddy, let's go to Budapest, and then let's make our way to Eretz Yisrael. Let's go to the land of Israel." And his daddy said, "No, son, we have to wait here for your mother and your sisters and your brother. Maybe they survived." And Menashe said, "No, Daddy, they're not coming back. There's nobody left." And Menashe told me that he wept that day for the last time. He never cried again. All the tears were gone. But what he told me was, at that moment, he and his father could just give up. It would not be surprising if someone said, "You know what, I'm done." But they didn't give up. They went to Budapest, and they were there for a few years. Menashe worked for the Jewish agency, the Sochnut, because he knew Hebrew and Hungarian and German and Yiddish. And so he helped the burgeoning Israeli government. There wasn't a state yet, but he helped them to start planning for waves of Aliyah, waves of immigration. And then in 1949, they made Aliyah. He went to the Technion. He got his degree as an engineer. He got a second master's degree. He fell in love with Miriam, and they built a family together. So the lesson is, we never give up. We never give up. We never lose our hope. We are forbidden to lose our hope because life is for living, and we're supposed to hold on to life with all we've got every moment we're granted. And so that's the first lesson, and it's a lesson every Yom HaShoah. In the pain, in the tears, in the agony, in the sorrow, we're reminded that we never give up hope. A few hours after I had this conversation with my cousin Menashe, and I wrote it all down and I recorded it, and I was so grateful that I got the time with him. I'd spent time with him before, but he'd never told me his story. I drove back to the school, El Harizi, and it was as the sun was setting, it was time for Yom HaZikaron. And you might have seen videos of this. You might have been there for Israel during this time, but a siren is sounded that goes off for 2 minutes, and the entire nation comes to a standstill. And the El Harizi school is an elementary school. There's about 500 kids there, very similar to our school in size, and wonderful community. And when you walk into the entrance of the El Harizi school, though, there's something very different. You don't just see student art and other beautiful things that you might see in any school. You also see there's a wall with the names on the wall of all the graduates of the school who've died in Israel's wars or in acts of terror since the birth of the state in 1948 to this very day. And there's 11 or 12 names on the wall, and some of the wise school students were asking Rabbi Noble and me, what is this? And we said, well, read it. And they can read Hebrew, and they said, oh, it's names. They read the names. And then they said, oh, there's dates here, Hebrew dates. And we asked them if they noticed anything about the Hebrew dates, and they said, well, there's 5 or 6 of these, 8 or 9 on the wall that all died right around the same time. And it was the month of Tishrei in the Hebrew year of 5734. What happened in Tishrei of 5734? The Hebrew year of Tashlad, it was 1973. Tishrei is the Yom Kippur War. And the students noticed that was a time when many of the graduates of the school had fallen. And then later that night, we had the opportunity to lay a wreath as part of the ceremony, the official ceremony of the school, and it was incredibly moving, and one of our students was just weeping, and it was so powerful. And the lesson of that night for our students, and for me as well, even though I've been in Israel for many Yom HaZikaron commemorations, but the lesson is that we have to remember. That's what the word Zikaron means. We have to remember the sacrifice that others made so that we can enjoy this incredible place. And we have to be grateful for the gift that they gave us, a gift that they didn't want to give. They all wanted to survive, but they made that sacrifice so that we could enjoy this extraordinary gift. And we have to honor their memory every year and every opportunity we have. And so that was the lesson of Yom HaZikaron, a lesson of memory and a lesson of honor. And finally, and it's how many of you have been to Israel for Yom HaZikaron, Yom Ha'atzmaut, that time of the year? Just a few of you. I know. How many of you have been to Israel, period? Yeah. So that's good. We're going to get it to 100% if we can. But a lot of you have been to Israel, but not so many have gone. You were there, Benjamin. Not so many of you have been there for Yom HaZikaron and Yom Ha'atzmaut. And it's so powerful. You go from this very, very sad day where you're remembering to this extraordinary celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut. And it's like almost, you snap your fingers and you go from one side of the continuum to the other. And so we were there for Yom Ha'atzmaut, and it's amazing. There are flags everywhere, and there's a sense of great celebration. And we gathered that evening. We danced in Kikar Rabin, which is right in the center of Tel Aviv, and there was fireworks and live music, and it was just amazing. We had such a good time. And our children had the chance to run around, and I think people were spraying confetti, in each other's eyes. Yeah, it's kind of cool. You've never seen anything like it, have you, Benjamin? It's crazy. Kids had a great time. The next day, what do Israelis do on Yom Ha'atzmaut? Mangal, you have to make a barbecue. And there's just celebrations and picnics all over town. And we took a long walk all the way from the apartment we were staying at all the way down to Rothschild Street, right near Heichal HaAtzmaut, which is the building where the Declaration of Independence was read. It was the place on May 14th, 1948, that David Ben-Gurion declared the birth of the state of Israel. And we were sitting outside enjoying a beautiful breakfast, and we heard the sound of the planes going overhead. The Israeli Air Force does a flyover the entire country. Now, Israel's so small that one group of 5 planes can do a flyover of the entire country in about 5 minutes. Yeah, you can see it everywhere. So these F-16s are flying overhead, and we jumped up to watch them. And I was just filled with a sense of incredible gratitude and pride, to think about what has been accomplished in 69 years, and to think of how grateful we should all be to be able to witness what our tradition calls Reshit Tzmichat Geulatenu, the first flowering of our redemption. We're not redeemed yet. We're not there yet. But this is the first flowering of our redemption. And I feel so lucky that I've had the opportunity to spend so much time in Israel and to be there for these sacred days. And to celebrate these moments. And I couldn't help but think, when I was watching those jets flying overhead, about the bookend of the trip, that time when I was with my cousin just a few days earlier. If there had been an IAF, an Israeli Air Force, in 1944, things would have turned out differently for maybe not everybody, but certainly for some of our family members whose lives might have been saved. And we think about, why didn't someone go and blow up those tracks to Auschwitz? Well, if we had had those jets then, I'm sure someone would have. So here's the invitation. I told these stories about hope and about remembering, and a story about gratitude and celebration. And now I want to invite you to come to Israel with me, with Cantor Lamb, with any one of our clergy when we go. I have a trip this summer, and we still have some spots on the bus, so it's not too late to sign up for that. In October, I'm leading a trip with the president of our congregation, and in your handout, there's a little blurb about that. If you go to wisela.org/Israel trip, all the information for that trip is there. It's the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration this year, so we're going to be in Israel. And then there's an add-on to London if you want to come and learn more about that moment. And there will be some celebrations in London, because were it not for that document, we might not have a state of Israel today. So as we are counting up to Sinai, this period from Passover to Shavuot, let's also remember to count our blessings. And let's remember to give thanks for all those who refused, despite the odds, to give up. To give thanks for those who made the ultimate sacrifice. And to give thanks and celebrate the gift of a Jewish state that must be cherished. Shabbat Shalom.